continued embattlement with House Democrats, his colorful tweets, and his fervent engagement with the media. First, the impeachment saga continues with several new developments. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, were both subpoenaed to appear before the House Intelligence Committee. Both have signaled their rejection of these subpoenas, indicating that they will not appear to testify. Trump himself did not shy away from controversy, weighing in on Twitter using hashtag fake whistleblower, then going on to tweet about this starting the next civil war, and even going so far as to use profanity in his description of the impeachment proceedings. Next, while the president of Finland was visiting Washington, Trump got into a lengthy sparring match with the media that started in the Oval Office.
Appointed by somebody that you would call the opposition, came out with a scathing and tough opinion. I won the case. I didn't see one story that I won that case, right? That stuff you should report. But you people should be ashamed of yourself. We have the most dishonest media that you can imagine, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
Then continued into a joint press conference and ended in the East Room.
And his son are stone cold crooked, and you know it. His son walks out with millions of dollars. The kid knows nothing. You know it, and so do we. Go ahead, ask a question.
The question, sir, was what did you want President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son Hunter?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up of what I just asked you, sir.
Listen, you ready? We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question.
I have one for him. I just wanted to follow up on the one that I asked you, which was...
Did you hear
what
me?
Did you
ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude.
No, sir, I don't want to be rude. I just wanted you to have a chance to answer the question that I asked you.
I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you and the fake news media that we have in this country. And I say, in many cases, the corrupt media.
Finally, Trump openly affirms that he not only wants Ukraine, but also China to open up an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden.
What exactly do you hope Zelensky would do about the Bidens after your phone call? Exactly.
Well, I would think that if they were honest about it, they'd start a major investigation into the Bidens. It's a very simple answer. They should investigate the Bidens, because how does a company that's newly formed, and all these companies, if you look at, and by the way, likewise, China should start an investigation into the Bidens, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine.
For more news on these stories and more, check us out at WashingtonExaminer.com. Thanks for watching. Dominated by the story of a White House whistleblower and what could be the impending impeachment for President Donald Trump. Here's a recap of everything that happened. On September 19th, a report came out that a White House whistleblower had come forward, reporting that Trump had made a troubling promise on a phone call to a foreign leader. The House Intelligence Committee, headed by Adam Schiff, requested that the transcript of the call be released to his committee. Here's what Trump had to say when initially asked about the matter.
Ridiculous story. It's a partisan whistleblower. They shouldn't even have information. I've had conversations with many leaders that are always appropriate, and anything I do, I fight for this country. I fight so strongly for this country. It's just another political hack job.
By Monday, news had come out that the phone call was with the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. Trump was in New York City to address the United Nations Assembly. But before his address, he chose to stop and initiate an impromptu press conference where he doubled down on his conversation with the Ukrainian president being inconsequential. Tuesday, more anonymous tips came in saying that Trump had ordered the freezing of Ukrainian aid because of what was discussed. With pressure mounting, Trump approved the release of the transcript of the phone call. Meanwhile, back in Washington, more members of Congress began to publicly support impeachment proceedings. Late that afternoon, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, held a press conference where she announced a formal impeachment inquiry. Wednesday, the White House released a declassified rough transcript of Trump's phone call with Zelensky to the House Intelligence Committee and the public. While still in New York, Trump had a public meeting with President Zelensky where they both answered questions regarding the phone call. Back in Washington, the whistleblower's complaint was given to the House Intelligence Committee, then soon after declassified and released to the public. On Thursday, the House Intelligence Committee spent the morning questioning Acting Director of National Intelligence, Joseph McGuire, about how he handled this whistleblower's inquiry. For more information on this story and others, join us at WashingtonExaminer.com. Hi, I'm Timothy Wolf with the Washington Examiner. This is the White House Weekly, and these are the top stories coming out of the White House for the week of September 20th, 2019. We start off with the White House's response to a seemingly targeted drone attack from Iran on oil fields in Saudi Arabia. When asked about it, here's what President Trump had to say.
Mr. President, have you seen evidence, proof that Iran was behind the attack?
Well, it's looking that way. The sanctions are massive. There's never been sanctions put on a country like that, and I think they have a tremendous future, but not the way they're behaving. But I will tell you, that was a very large attack, and it could be met with an attack many, many times larger very easily by our country.
Next, we move on to Trump's decision that he announced over Twitter for his administration to revoke California's federal waiver on emissions, arguing that this is going to make cars safer and more affordable. California Governor Gavin Newsom and other critics of this decision are saying that Trump is causing more automobile emissions and thus adding to the effects of climate change. Finally, Trump was not only talking about California, but he also visited the state. While he was there, he visited a border wall that was under construction and then signed it. For the Washington Examiner, I'm Timothy Wolf. This has been the White House Weekly. Thanks for watching.
The biggest change we make is to increase the proportion of highly skilled immigration from 12% to 57%, and we'd like to even see if we can go higher. And yet, for whatever reason, it's been quite a while since a Republican won this state, but we're going to win the state. I think we're going to win the state easy. Now, under the Green New Deal, that all goes away. That all goes away.
President Trump has said he wants to pass a tax cut for the middle class once he's re-elected with a GOP-run Congress. But with fears of a recession that could hurt his electability, Trump and his advisors don't want to wait. There's only one problem. Democrats hold the House, and bipartisan achievements are few and far between. Instead, many advisors, including Mike Pence and Larry Kudlow, are looking at a long fantasized reform, indexing capital gains to account for inflation. Arguably, this can be done without Congress, and that's where two over 20-year-old rulings come into play. In 1992, the Justice Department ruled, quote, "The Department of Treasury does not have legal authority to index capital gains for inflation." While that sounds open and shut for Trump's tax cut, a second ruling 5 years later could offer a solution. In 1997, the case of Auer v. Robbins was heard by the Supreme Court. Several police sergeants and a lieutenant sued the Board of Police Commissioners for overtime pay, but the commission had a rule that salaried employees can't receive overtime. In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court decided that it was up to agencies to interpret their own statutes in cases of ambiguity. This ruling became known as the Auer deference and was upheld as recently as June 2019. So what does this have to do with a possible tax cut? Well, President Trump says he has legal authority to index capital gains for inflation.
Well, you know, we've been talking about indexing for a long time, and many people like indexing, and it can be done very simply. It can be done directly by me. And so we've been looking at that. As you probably have heard, I can do it directly.
According to an op-ed written by Senator Ted Cruz and activist Grover Norquist, the Auer deference makes that clear. Could the Auer deference allow for Trump to index capital gains? That remains to be seen. Odds are there would be pushback from the left for such an executive order. But were Trump to try and push this through, the Auer deference says it would be up to the Justice Department to interpret their 1992 ruling.
The National Guard is here not in the capacity as much people as would think as an order, say, from the state or anything, but more on a continuous basis year after year to basically monitor, not monitor, but just to maintain this area and to clear it all out.
In the 1980s, there were about 300 staff cartoonists at newspapers around the country. Now there are fewer than 100. Newspapers are grappling with a steep decline in advertising revenue and trying to reinvent themselves online.
I'm David Drucker with the Washington Examiner on Capitol Hill, and we're joined this week by Congressman Devin Nunes of California, the top Republican on the Intelligence Committee. Let's talk about your role in the impeachment inquiry. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is basically running this through the Intelligence Committee. What are you and your Republican colleagues doing to push back on this? What is your strategy?
Well, they do a good job of pushing back on their own because they're not doing a real impeachment. I call it faux impeachment. By running it at the House Intelligence Committee, they're trying to keep all the information from the American public, and I understand why, because every witness we have that comes in, it bombs out for them, doesn't have the goods like they promise. Once President Trump released the transcript, it blew that apart. Now we know that the Intelligence Committee Democrats were meeting with the whistleblower. So this goes on, and this is not a real impeachment. And now you've got the White House saying that they're not going to give over anything, documents or anything, until the House votes.
So
and you understand why, and I think hopefully your viewers understand. The House has to take a vote in order for them to really start an impeachment process, to give us subpoena power, the Democrats subpoena power, so that you can have a real investigation, so that then the members of Congress can decide whether or not impeachment is the appropriate avenue.
Do you think holding a vote to initiate an impeachment inquiry, which is something that the majority Republicans did in 1998 when they proceeded with an impeachment of Bill Clinton, would satisfy Republicans at least with this idea that the administration should hand over documentation that Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi are asking for?
It depends. I mean, I'm going to leave that up to the White House lawyers, because there's 200 years of precedent, and I'm not trying to dodge the answer, but there's over 200 years of precedent here. So that'll be up to the courts ultimately. I always like to err on the side of transparency. So does the President Trump and the White House. They always like to get the information out. But I think they do need to do what they're doing now this time, because they need to be smarter, because we know this is not, like I said, this is a faux impeachment. They're not serious about this. If they were, there'd be the votes. People would be standing up and saying, we got to impeach now. You know, this is not Nixon, where the vote was, 430 to 4.
Okay.
Or whatever the vote was there. You know, when I wasn't here for the Bill Clinton impeachment, but that had 40 Democrats that voted for the inquiry. This is just it's a show trial without any evidence.
Okay, let's talk about some of the evidence that the Democrats at least are claiming is evidence.
That'll be a short conversation.
I'll try and keep it no longer than it needs to be. I think what we're going to be hearing a lot of over the next few days is these text messages between diplomats working on behalf of the administration with Ukraine, trying to move the administration's agenda in that part of the world. Mm-hmm. And these text messages are talking about concern that the White House is dangling a visit to Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, but only in exchange for investigating both the 2016 election and what happened there, and Joe and Hunter Biden. Democrats feel like they have the beginnings of what would be a quid pro quo, which many Republicans have said, well, if you actually had that would constitute possibly grounds for an impeachment inquiry.
Just because it's in a text message where you actually have the other side of the text message, which is, no, there is no quid pro quo, I mean, it pretty much ends it right there. We already met with the special envoy for Ukraine. This is the person that was in the middle of everything. He was very clear that he never thought that anything was inappropriate or wrong. In fact, if I took anything from his testimony, this is Special Envoy Volker, it was that he felt, and this is somebody who has decades of experience with Ukraine, that the administration and under his leadership got to a very good point. And this talk about impeachment, this talk about all these investigations has really hurt the United States, hurt our national security.
Okay, let's talk about the transcript in and of itself, because I've talked to Democrats and some from swing districts who don't get, let's say, as riled up about some of the broader accusations against the president as do liberal Democrats and even Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff from California, but talk about the transcript in which they say that even if there's a debate over whether or not a quid pro quo was dangled because of discussion of military aid on the transcript, according to the transcript, even though they'll take issue with Republicans' views on that, what they say is that the president clearly asked Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden and his son, and Joe Biden is one of his chief political rivals, somebody who he might face on the ballot in the 2020 election, and that in and of itself is improper and is grounds for an inquiry.
Well, there's a lot of areas we can go there, but first of all, we know from the beginning of this is that they fabricated what the president had actually said. So they were meeting with the whistleblower, then they fabricated what the president said. Then when the transcript came out, guess what? There was nothing in the transcript. So the president has been very clear across the board, okay? Very, very clear across the board with every country. He's tired of the U.S. doing the major support for countries all over the globe when countries in the region aren't helping. And so you can apply that to Ukraine, you can apply that to parts of Eastern Europe, you can apply it to Afghanistan, you can apply it to the Middle East. It's been his position, and the person in charge of that, a decades-long career diplomat, Volker, okay?
Kurt Volker, who has since resigned,
said no, he didn't feel that anything was wrong. But there was nothing there.
But according to your reading of the transcript, is it fair to say that the president asked Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to initiate an investigation into Joe Biden?
No, it's not. That's not what's in the transcript.
If you felt that that's what the president had said according to the transcript, would you take issue with that?
Probably not.
And
yeah, I mean, because I don't think, first of all, that never happened. Okay, the whole issue, that's fake news. But what is not fake news is the origins of the Russia investigation start in Ukraine. Why? Because the Democrats were paying people to get information from Ukrainians, dirt on Trump. Okay, so I'll say that again. The Democrats in 2015 and 16 were paying Ukrainians and government and to interview and get dirt from government officials that then they fed to the FBI. Now, Mueller didn't indict him for that, right? Mueller only indicted people that lied to him. He didn't indict the Democrats who did that. So if Trump did even the worst of what they're saying, why didn't Mueller indict the Democrats? So, I mean, we would have to have all kinds of indictments here. And it still goes back to the fact that, it's still factual. If you're talking to someone, you as an American are free to go around the world and talk to whoever you want. You're guaranteed those rights in the Constitution. Correct. And so if somebody says, hey, I've got some dirt on a Republican, and here's some nude pictures, and they give it to you as a press person or the Democratic Party and Nancy Pelosi, that's not illegal. Now, you may want to be careful with where that came from, but it's not illegal.
Is it proper for the...
And I say the nude photos because, I say it half jokingly, but you had the mainstream media and the Democrats, including the Democrats on the Intelligence Committee, running around talking to Russians and Ukrainians looking for what? Nude photos of the president. That's a fact. And you had mainstream media, the major news outlets in this country, over in Europe, trying to find the nude photos of President Trump. Who were they talking to? Foreigners. Are we going to bust the media people too?
Nope. Point's taken. Do you have any problem with this president or future presidents, either publicly or behind closed doors, trying to initiate foreign heads of state into initiating investigations into Americans, political rivals, versus a process that would work through the DOJ and the FBI?
But that is exactly that's the right way to do it. And when people come to me, and people come to me all the time,
right.
Most of the time it's, somebody's version of the facts that ends up not being true, but there are times where it seems like there is some level of truth to it. We always recommend that we give it to DOJ, or I will just refer it. I'll take that information and I'll send it to the DOJ. That's exactly what the president said to do.
The president has also enlisted his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, the former New York mayor, who's very well known, in this effort into working with Ukrainian officials, both in regards to the Bidens and the 2016 election. I think that the broader question here is it proper and is it a good precedent to set to have a president of the United States enlist his personal attorney to do this rather than this going through official channels the way you did? In other words, the president could have said, I think this bothers me.
So we're talking about two different things here. Okay. So you have to go back in time. You have to remember what was actually going on at the time. Okay, now, if a president just randomly was, parachuting his personal attorney down into, countries where he thought he could get some dirt on political opponents, okay, that's, as we talked about, that might be questionable. That's not what this is. The Russia investigation that Rudy Giuliani was defending the president. Remember, The Mueller investigation is still going when Ukrainians are coming to Congress, they're going to the U.S. Senate, they're going to the House, they're going to the White House, they're going to anybody who will listen. Hey, there's corruption here.
Correct.
Okay, so it is absolutely the president's right and the president's attorney's right to go and look to see, okay, what is this? Because, why? Because the Democrats paid Ukrainians and asked Ukrainians for dirt on Trump.
But he
so they're
also,
trying to get to the bottom and the origins of that investigation.
correct, but he
that
also,
could have been valuable for the Mueller investigation.
very true, but he also